Thursday, the 10th of January 2013. Getting away with it. How many drunk idiots have been brought to me after crashing their cars? 100? 200? Probably more than that. And how many of them have actually been arrested? I can probably count that on one hand. Most of these maniacs get away with it, something that makes me absolutely livid. Now, how many of them have gotten simple citations for their besotted idiocy? I don't keep actual statistics, but based on my memory, it's likely less than 10%. Most of the time, the police don't even show up, and when they do, they don't seem to feel like hanging around until our workup is done so they can issue the ticket. One police officer actually told me that it just isn't worth it. Isn't worth it? I just stared at him incredulous. It drives me bat crap crazy when these people get away with crimes like this that put everyone, my wife and children included, at risk of serious injury or death. In fact, I get aggravated when someone gets away with something as simple as a traffic violation, which seems to be a perfect segue into my first mini rant of 2013. I was sitting on the freeway in stop and go traffic on my way to the hospital this morning. A police car right in front of me, something I usually find to be very comforting. As we were passing an on-ramp, I noticed a taxi in the other lane swing into the on-ramp lane to get around a few cars. It pisses me off when I see people do this, because it's like they're telling me, I'm far too important and in far too much of a hurry to sit in traffic like the rest of you plebs. I'm making my own traffic rules. I immediately yelled at the policeman in front of me to pull the taxi driver over, which I'm fairly certain he didn't hear through my windscreen and his back window. Traffic continued at a near standstill, while the taxi got ahead 5 or 6 cars. Congratulations, a-hole. Now you get to keep sitting in traffic with the rest of us underlings. About a minute later, we started to pull even with the far too important cab who had again been caught in the slower lane. I noticed the policeman sliding over towards him, and my mouth started to curl into a smile. It broadened into a huge grin as he flipped his lights on, swung quickly behind the taxi, and pulled him over. Ah, justice. Sweet, sweet justice. Friday, the 18th of January 2013. Medical shows. I got another request from a reader named Mr. M, not his real name. I hadn't thought about a post like this, but his question piqued my interest in the subject. Hi Doc B, I have a wish for one of your interesting blog entries. Could you give us your perspective as a real practicing surgeon on medical TV shows like Grey's Anatomy, Dr. House or ER, and tell us how they compare to real life in the hospital? I know they try to incorporate real but very rare medical cases, but what interests me more is how daily life in hospital is portrayed. With the relationships between doctors, the time they seem to have to discuss personal problems in the hospital, 9 surgeons in one OR in one case, or all 9 of them in a bar together, some living together in the same house. You do a great service to dispel these myths and perceptions about medicine created by these shows, because I personally know people who want to go to medical school to live the life portrayed in these shows. Now, the thing to remember about TV is that it's meant to be entertainment, not informative. I can guarantee that no one would actually watch a reality TV show based on my life. While my stories may seem mildly interesting or entertaining, they are few and far between, which explains why it's often a week or more between entries. The vast majority of what I do is mundane and boring. I hope that doesn't disappoint too many people, but that's reality, folks. I watched a few episodes of Grey's Anatomy, and it's nothing more than a glamorized soap opera. The social interactions that these people have are complete and utter bull, to put it mildly. Sure, there may be an odd affair here and there in real life, but the show makes it seem like everyone in the hospital is having sex with everyone else, and that just isn't the case. In reality, most of us have boring lives, and at the end of the day, we go home in our boring cars to our boring families. ER was interesting and fun to watch, but it's just as exaggerated. What drove me nuts was how almost every patient who was shocked by the defibrillator came back after the 3rd shock. No. Most of these people die in real life. Real death? And whenever anyone got intubated, the person putting the breathing tube in would triumphantly announce, "I'm in," and the nurses swoon in and ovulate. Sorry, but we don't do that. Ever. If anyone ever did that in real life, he'd probably get kicked in the crotch for being corny. As far as House is concerned, I will shamefully admit that I watched almost every episode, but only because my wife made me. I swear it wasn't because of the interesting cases. The biggest problem with that show is that drama and the pranks in the hospital just don't happen. At all. Worse yet, there's no such thing as a department of diagnostic medicine at any hospital like they have on the show. The real diagnosticians are internists, surgeons, cardiologists, nephrologists, etc. We don't farm out our interesting cases to smarter doctors because we just can't figure it out. The way the doctors give IV medicines, do all their own procedures, surgeries, MRIs, ultrasounds and biopsies is completely fabricated. Radiology techs do all the scans, surgeons do surgery, pathologists look at specimens, lab techs do blood work. And though the names of the diseases presented on House may be real, the presentation and evolution of the disease process that is shown is exaggerated, embellished, accelerated, or some combination thereof. House's basic premise was to come up with a list of possible diagnoses on the patient's problem, narrow it down to one, and then treat it before confirming it. Inevitably, that treatment wouldn't work. Well, I guess it isn't lymphoma. And another symptom would emerge. Oh my gosh, I can't feel my legs! Prompting a change of diagnosis and a new treatment which also wouldn't work. And so on, until House had his House moment and figured it all out. No, it isn't lupus. It's never lupus. Social interactions are why people watch the show. If it were purely medical, it would flop after one episode. No one wants to see cordial people politely greeting each other as they walk down the hall, making idle conversation in the elevators, and silently watching TV while gobbling a sandwich in the lounge in between cases. But that's reality. Every now and then I get an interesting case, but inevitably I solve it, fix it, and move on to the next patient with regular, ordinary, run-of-the-mill appendicitis. But instead, people would rather see the surgeon having wild sex with the nurse in the broom closet. Now that is good television. Friday the 25th of January 2013. Insults and happy endings. There are certain people in your life that you just shouldn't insult. These are people that can make your life a living hell if they so choose, or if you choose for them. Sure, there are some easy ones, your parents, your teachers, your neighbours, your boss, but there are a few which may not be so obvious. Your mechanic. Yep, I'm gonna have to rebuild your whole engine. The guy who makes your fast food burger. Yes, they do spit in them. Your children. They will choose your nursing home eventually after all. Surprisingly though, some people don't have any problem insulting their doctors. You know, the people who are trying to help them. I've heard stories from colleagues that were almost too ridiculous to believe, and I've never experienced it myself. Until now. An older gentleman was brought to me after he fell down an embankment and struck his head on a brick wall. Fortunately, his brain was just fine, but after an extensive workup, I discovered only two things were broken. A bone in his neck was one of them. His wife's sense of decency was the other. As soon as I walked into his room to explain the situation to her, she immediately launched a full-scale attack against me, based not on my abilities, but rather on my looks. I unfortunately have one of those baby faces, and it makes me look much younger, and much less respectable apparently, than I am. "My God, how old are you?" she shrieked. "You look like you still belong in high school. Are you even old enough to be a doctor?" What? Somehow restraining my desire to slap her, I ignored her age comment and calmly explained that I was not only fully trained, but also very good at what I do. "Well, I'm not going to let my husband get killed by some baby doctor. My mother was killed by a baby doctor like you." Now up until that point, I thought I had seen it all. I'd been sworn at, spit at, cursed at, and threatened with violence and even death numerous times. But never have I been so insulted in my entire professional career. I realised that trying to defend myself would get me nowhere, so I simply finished explaining the situation to them and walked out. But wait, the title of the post is Insults and Happy Endings, so what the hell is the happy ending? Here it is. I got the last laugh. The neurosurgeon who ended up taking care of his broken neck is even younger than I am. Sunday the 3rd of February 2013. Being right. What could possibly be better than being right? You get to look smart, prove someone else wrong, and generally look like a hero. What could be better than that? Being wrong. What? I hear you scream. I've said before that it's better to be lucky than wrong, and there have been very few times in my career when I have hoped against hope that I'm wrong. These have been the times when I suspect a diagnosis that is life-altering and not for the better. Come on, I'm not diagnosing winning lottery tickets here, people. A 30-something-year-old woman came to the emergency room complaining of abdominal pain, which has been ongoing for the past several days. As soon as any young person, or any person for that matter, complains of abdominal pain, it seems that ER docs immediately think appendicitis, call surgery. True to form, I was called. Fortunately, the ER doc had at least done the workup, and I would freely admit it was very concerning. At first glance, she looked ill. And when people look ill, it's a pretty damn good sign that they're ill. The first thing I did after glancing at her was to talk to her, something that many doctors these days just don't do, preferring to rely on lab tests and CT scans, and failing to realise how much invaluable information can be gleaned from a simple conversation. She told me that the pain had started a few days ago in her lower abdomen, and around the same time she started having some yellowish vaginal discharge. Red flag. She had also noticed pain during sexual intercourse. Big red flag. I pressed on her abdomen, and she was clearly in excruciating pain. I then excused myself to look at her CT scan. Yes, they're still almost as important as talking to the patient, and she had a large abscess, collection of pus, on both sides of her pelvis. Well, I've never heard of someone having an appendix on both sides, so my mind immediately went elsewhere. Girl parts. In my mind, this woman did not have appendicitis. Rather, she had tubo-ovarian abscesses on both sides, and she needed urgent surgery by a gynecologist to drain them and possibly remove her infected tubes and/or ovaries. Rarely, infections, usually chlamydia or gonorrhea, can spread up the female productive tract and form horrendous infectious complexes in the ovaries and fallopian tubes. This was where I desperately hoped I was wrong. If one or both ovaries had to be removed, it could be devastating for a young woman's fertility. Even if the ovaries and tubes are left in, they can scar to the point where they no longer function. And it gets worse. Of course it does. She and her husband were trying to get pregnant with their first child, and she had just stopped taking her birth control pills 2 months prior. Please let me be wrong. Please let me be wrong. The last thing I wanted was to be right. A ruptured appendix with an abscess is fairly easy to take care of, but this diagnosis was potentially life-changing. Unfortunately, according to the ER doctor and the gynecologist, I was already wrong. Despite all the evidence to the contrary, they were firmly convinced that it was her appendix that was the problem, not her girl parts. Another surgeon, one of my most senior colleagues, was brought in as a second opinion, and he agreed with the gynecologist. By this point, her blood pressure was starting to drop, her temperature was going up, her heart rate was starting to go up, she was sweating more, she was getting sicker. There wasn't any more time to argue. So I ended up taking her to the operating theatre at 1 AM, and much to my surprise, I found, please let me be wrong, please let me be wrong, tubo-ovarian abscesses on both sides. God damn it. Her left ovary looked okay, but her left fallopian tube was a mess. Her right tube and ovary were both obliterated by the infection. The gynecologist ended up taking out her right tube and ovary, but kept the left tube and ovary in. The next morning I told her and her husband what we found and what we did, and naturally she was devastated. I reassured her that she still had one fairly normal ovary and a perfectly normal uterus, so at worst she would need to have her eggs extracted, fertilized in vitro, and implanted into her uterus. Her egg, her baby. It was cold comfort at best. Sure, I had been right, but that had been an even colder comfort. There's just no way to sugarcoat it. Sorry folks, no happy ending this time.